So, now we start with the opening keynote, and many know him, maybe not all of you, know him as the unofficial cartographer of the media universe. It was in 2019, I think, when you started that, and we had him that time at MediaTech Hub conference online. Today he is here in person. It was, by the way, the sessions with the longest overtime we ever had in that year. I know, but it was so interesting. So the maps he's doing have since been adopted by businesses, executives and analysts around the world, and colleges as well. Using his very specific point of view, he charged the media's future through his essays on the Media War and Peace newsletter and with his change agency, eShep. He is also an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning producer of TV, films, and podcasts, and he serves as a professor at the New York University and Fordham Schools of Business, as board chair for nonprofit educational enterprise One Diverse Industry, and as co-host of the Cancel Culture podcast. But he calls himself, and I asked him about that in the interview, which you can read in the magazine Unfold, which all of you have, he calls himself a creator. And if you follow him with his essays and posts, you see a very open-minded, focused, provocative industry leader with a straightforward, clear, and human attitude. And I take my hat off to Evan Shapiro. Welcome to MediaTech Hub Conference.
Thanks so much. I can't say how much of an honor it is to be with you all in this historic space. I'm a little choked up by that introduction. It's just, daunting to follow Minister Steinbach as well. So thank you all for having me here. As the minister said, we are at a moment of great innovation. There was a time where change was the only constant, but now change is constant. And if you don't embrace that, you will not get to the future of where this industry and, frankly, our world needs to be. Think about this space in 1912. This was a startup, right? We are at the moment where we need to start up new innovations, new parts of the industry, and we need to embrace the change that's around us, or we will miss the moment, and the moment will overtake us. So who here has seen this map before? Raise your hand. It's okay if you have not. Oh, wow. Okay, great. Thank you. So I started making this map about 5 years ago for a class at NYU, and then it dropped online, and it kind of blew up a little bit. This map was, I make this map, remake it twice a month by hand in PowerPoint. It's as painful as it sounds. I just dropped this new one yesterday online. What it does is, there are 125 companies on this map. The x-axis of this map are the valuations of these companies, so it's publicly available information available from the stock market and company reports. And when you dive into the numbers, I do it by hand because it re-wrinkles my brain every time. And when you go in and you pay that close attention, without the interference of AI, you're doing it yourself, it shows you trajectories. It shows you where, to use a hockey term, the puck is going. But when I dropped this map 5 years ago, it was not meant to be a prediction. It was not meant to be a prognostication. It was not meant to tell you what was going to happen. It was meant to recognize what had already happened, and that most of the industry at that moment was completely ignoring. We've gone from a time of, remember FOMO, how hot that word was? Fear of missing out. We are now in an era of FOFO, fear of finding out. And the ignoring of what was happening around us at that time was a danger. So I made this map to declare what was happening, that big tech had already overtaken media. Now I'll give you a factoid to prove that out. Who here has a smartphone? Right. Who here has an Apple iPhone? Who here has an Android with the green bubbles? Who here has a different kind of phone other than Android and iPhone? 100% of the smartphone users on the face of the earth are controlled by just 2 companies. 100%. That was as true 5 years ago as it is today. I'll give you another mathematical example of this. The market cap of the 125 companies on this map is $20 trillion. The 6 big tech death stars on this map represent 15 trillion, or 73% of the value in this media ecosystem. 73% of the value of the media world is controlled by just 6 companies. And by the way, 3 years ago, when NVIDIA was worth about $500 billion, I said it's going to be worth $1 trillion very soon. It's now worth $3 trillion. That's how you can use data to pay attention to what's going on around you. If you ignore the data, you will miss the things going on. Here's a different map that I made last year. This divides the media universe into audience on the right-hand side and revenues on the left-hand side. Now, when I go into these infographics, first of all, I do consider myself a creator. I consider myself a storyteller. Using data as the characters, I turn it into narrative. I never go in with a preconceived notion. Unlike a screenwriter who has an idea of where they may be going, I don't know where I'm going. I let the data tell the story to me, and then I put it up on screen. When I went into this pool of data, which is mostly from Ampere Analysis, great research firm, I had no idea what it was going to tell me. And then all of a sudden, the aha moment hit me, like the turning point of a third act. Mobile at the center of everything, right? Biggest audience on the face of the earth, biggest user base, 7 billion people, biggest revenue base, almost $1 trillion in revenue, probably over $1 trillion in the next year. And then, as I put this together, so mobile's in the center of everything, which is actually counter to the bias I went in with. I believe that the connected television is now the home screen of the home. Most video in the home, even amongst younger people, is watched on a big screen television. We bought more of them during COVID than we ever thought we would, putting them in rooms we never thought would have TVs, out by the barbecue, out back, in the extra bedroom, because we needed to stay home and entertain ourselves. But mobile is at the center of everything, and this is how I'll prove it to you. Who here has a smartphone? Who here is their smartphone the first thing they touch in the morning? Who here is their smartphone the last thing they touch at night? Be honest. Sorry for your significant others. But regardless of what media we use, regardless of what subscriptions we have, regardless of what platforms we have, or what we watch on, a laptop, a tablet, a television, the smartphone is the remote control by which we drive our lives, right? It is the thing where we change our suite of media subscriptions in the system settings with swipes of our thumbs based on our mood. And it's never been easier to interchange them than now at this moment in time. This is how the consumer sees the media universe, our industry, our world. Mobile is at the center because it's the control device, it's the remote control. And then there's this myriad of choice, when we layered on the choice at first, it was great, but now it is this labyrinth that is very hard to navigate. When I created this map, it was not meant to predict anything. It was not meant to prognosticate. It was not in order to tell people what was coming 18 months from now, because we always say that. It's coming 18 months from now, right? It was meant to announce something that had already happened, something that happened 5 years ago in 2019 when Disney went direct to consumer, chasing Netflix down the rabbit hole of an ad-free television business. That's not a thing. And all the horsemen of the streaming apocalypse chased after them down that rabbit hole. At that moment in time, we finally ceded the last vestiges of control to the consumer. We left the gatekeeper, top-down controlled media era, and we entered a new era, the user-centric era. The user is now in control of the media universe, complete control. Big tech is dominant, but the consumer uses big tech to control our universe on their screens, on their phones, on their laptops, on their tablets, on their televisions. There is a new set of rules. The minister, I think, talked about this eloquently. There are a new set of rules in this media universe, and if we ignore them, we will cede control to players we don't even know, some kid in a garage somewhere. But if you follow the rules of the user-centric era, if you change your businesses to meet the moment, then you can do more than just survive this new moment. You can do more than survive in the user-centric era. You can thrive. So I'm going to use data to tell you the story of how the rules of the user-centric era will work. And then we can talk about that on the other side, maybe at breakfast tomorrow, okay? That's a lame answer, okay? Yes. Okay, great. So first of all, you have to know who the users are. On planet Earth right now, almost 2/3 of the population is under 40. So if you are over 40, for many of you who are in this room for the first time in your lives, you're in the minority. Welcome. I know it's hard to believe, but I am also over 40. But you also have to look at how your own region reflects against the rest of the world. The United States is older than the rest of the world, still majority under 40. Europe is super fucking old. It's actually a financial problem that you're going to have in years ahead, by the way. You're not producing enough young people to pay into the tax base to take care of all of the old people and all of the services that you want to provide. In particular, Germany is super old. Holy crap. I mean, I don't mean to insult you, but holy wow, right? And so sometimes if Europe and the United States feels out of touch with the rest of the world, this is one of the reasons why. You have to understand where the population is headed. Also, if you look at things that have happened in other territories, especially North America, the streaming habits and other media habits, a lot of the things that haven't yet happened here are coming in this coming generational wave of millennials and Gen Z and Generation Alpha that are coming in behind it. As the generations age, millennials are not kids, they have kids, right? 70% of the world's population under 20 are parented by millennials. Okay? They own homes, they run businesses, they are taking over the businesses. Generation A and Generation Z and millennials are now 50% of the workforce. They will be 75% of the workforce by the end of this decade. And then Generation A will enter the workforce behind that. By the way, if you sometimes feels like Europe and the United States are out of touch with the rest of the world, it's because sometimes we are, and generationally we definitely are. Almost 2/3 of the population in Latin America is under 40. Almost 2/3 of the population in Asia is under 40. 51% of the population of Africa is under 20. And by the way, the incomes are rising faster in Africa than any other territory on the planet Earth. So if you're looking for opportunity for your business, especially if you want to export your content, there are territories that want it and they have the resources to buy it. Look beyond the experiences of your own desk and your own territory. This is how the consumer, you also have to know who your consumer is, but you also have to see the world through their eyes. This is how the consumer now sees the media landscape. Again, more choice than ever, more content than ever, available on more platforms wherever the consumer wants, whenever they want it. Awesome, right? But over the last number of years, we've layered on services and platforms and subscriptions and all these different choices that have now actually become a frustrating corn maze, and discovery is becoming almost impossible. If you've ever studied the scientific research around the paradox of choice, when we give the consumer limitless choice, they make fewer choices. The original study, I think, was with jelly beans, but it's true with everything. The average consumer now has 100 different individual logons. I use the same password for everything. 1, 2, 3. I probably shouldn't tell you. But this is the paradox of choice. This has now become frustrating for the consumer. Who here has logged onto a service, looked for something to watch, couldn't find it, logged off, logged onto a different service, couldn't find something to watch, logged off, logged onto a different service, couldn't find something to watch, gave up, poured yourself a glass of wine, maybe smoked a spliff, and then just watched Friends? We're having this problem, and we work in the industry. So imagine the average consumer who doesn't understand actually how it works. So you have to follow the data. The data will solve a lot of these problems. Interestingly, when you look at the data, this is 500,000 interviews with Generation Z, 17 to 26-year-olds, done by GWI, another good research firm, including Germany, the United States, and other territories. When you ask Generation Z, the most persnickety consumers in the history of the world, what their priorities are when it comes to their streaming and their content, it's content, 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 and content. The relevancy of it, the number of originals and exclusives, the refresh rate, and the library size. The economic model around the platform doesn't come into consideration until 5th place. Whether or not there are ads, they don't give a shit. If they want the content, they'll watch the ads. Think about sports. Even on a pay service, they'll watch ads. So even in the user-centric era where data is king, data is important, content is still king. However, content has become commoditized. When you ask the consumers, and I'm going to speed up because I have limited time, and I don't want to run over because I just got shit for that. Thank you. When you look at all the choices they have, you have to understand there's a difference between over 35 and under 35, and I can talk about that ad nauseum. But there are a lot of similarities as well. Social media and major premium streaming are number 1 and 2 for both sets of consumers. Pay television, cable TV, whatever you want to call it, is a priority, still number 3 for over 35, but the virtual version of pay TV is now a rising priority for younger consumers. Look how important music is. Look how important gaming is for both sets of consumers. Who here plays a game on their phone, like a puzzle game or Wordle or anything like that? You're a gamer. 85% of the world's population are gamers. Even if you play on a phone with a puzzle or do crossword, that's a game, right? So think about that. The average consumer now has 13 different media services that they use on a daily basis. That's free and paid, that's video and music, that's gaming, all social media. But less than half of them, 48%, are considered must-have, uncancelable services. So you need to be in that 48%. Otherwise, you're getting ready to be canceled when they press down on the app and then it wiggles and they just swipe it off their screen, right? So this is the hierarchy of feeds that the consumer thinks about when they think about, I gotta get rid of this cursor, it's really bugging the heck out of me. When they think about all the media services they use. This is the elegant way, the elegant, computers. The elegant way that we promised them media would work. Things flowing into each other. By the way, reading is in the top priorities for people over 35. Remember reading? This is things like The Economist and newspapers and Media War and Peace, my newsletter, which you can subscribe to right now on your iPhones. I'll wait. Why is that funny? So this is what we promised them, but this is not what we're delivering. We are delivering a much more friction-filled experience, not an easy flow from reading down to social media. And that is our fault. That is the promise we made, and we have broken it, and we need to address it. The data is the bloodline. Content is king, but data is now the way you can survive. You have to read it, you have to listen to it, you have to understand what it's saying to you, and you have to be able to divide the wheat from the chaff. Small sample surveys versus big data. Important research versus stuff that's just clickbait. So I'll dive into that. This is the television universe. It's never been more fragmented than it is today. The largest television manufacturer on the planet Earth, Samsung, only has 15% market share. 40+% of the world's televisions are made by tiny little regional players, controlled usually by the brother of the president of the country that it's in. And then what you also see is not only is it fragmented, but it's also a circular firing squad where television manufacturers and television OS companies like Google and Roku and Amazon also directly compete with the services that are on their platform. Samsung doesn't only make TVs, they now have a TV service called Samsung TV Plus, and they're competing for eyeballs, attention, time, and revenue with the channels that they distribute. I'll get into that in a second. A lot of the data out there is now confusing to us. There's so much hyperbole around streaming. Streaming is the most important thing ever, right? But the habits actually don't always meet the data. So most television in the United States is still watched on regular old TV, pay TV and broadcast. This is Nielsen, so take it with a grain of salt. This is Nielsen's data from August, and you can see 48%. Regularly, when they measure it, 50% or more is on pay TV or broadcast. This is the lowest it's ever been in August and July, and streaming reached 40%. And that's going to continue. That trend is going to continue to switch. But still, most television in the world is watched on broadcast and pay TV. However, the pay television world is disintegrating in front of our faces. So that's not just a user base, this is also revenue tied to it as well. I don't have the revenue numbers here. Meanwhile, SVOD is rising, right? It's the hot thing. It's the new rocket ship that's going to save everything. But the problem is it's not a one-to-one replacement of the pay TV revenue that we are now losing very quickly. And the growth is slowing. Last 6 years, 243%. Next 5 years, 22%. So it's slowing, and it's also more competitive than it's ever been. So there are more players fighting for those dollars. In Europe, it's the same thing. Most television, here you have public broadcasting, and you're super old, remember that? So the television habits are even more dramatic. Fewer people stream, more people watch TV. And the pay TV ecosystem is disintegrating. However, you have something here that we do not have in the United States that I covet very badly, which is public service media. And it is shrinking across Europe, but not as quickly as pay TV. And when you dig in, again, in Germany, most television is watched on broadcast and pay. However, the pay ecosystem is disintegrating. And they have this great element, public service media, which is actually not shrinking. It is flat, which is the new up, right? And if you can convince your government to continue to sustain public service media, by the way, there's great research that correlates the health of public service media in a country to the health of its democracy. Thank you. I did. Not an applause on, but this is data. This is not my opinion. There's tons of studies on it. So the importance of an independent news organization that is funded by the taxpayers, that is outside traditional commercial elements, is crucial. It's also a great place to sell content to. It's a great partner. And by the way, the big streamers from around the world are starting to cut back on their scripted and unscripted content and invest in things like sports or not invest, especially in territories in Europe and around the rest of the world. So the public service broadcasters are going to they're going to rise in importance if you let them over the next number of years. Streaming is rising, 255% increase over the last 6 years, 28% over the next 5 years. And again, more competition than ever. So this is not a rocket ship to the moon, and it's not going to save things. You're going to have to look outside of the traditional big gatekeeper buyers if you're going to thrive. This is the share of TV OS in the United States. You can see how dramatic it is. However, in Europe, Amazon and Samsung are the big players. This is the last millimeter of glass between you and the consumer. You have to understand how much control the television manufacturers are going to take up over the next 10 years. They're already in real control. They're dictating what gets into the homes of your consumers, but they're also going to control the economics on an ongoing basis. Incredibly fragmented. Roku's #1 in America. It's not top 5 in the rest of the world. If you look at the number of Googles and Amazons on this list, though, that's who's going to vie for that duopoly that's in smartphones now. So there used to be a bunch of gatekeepers like the cable providers and the telcos and the public broadcasters, but the new gatekeepers are big tech. And we used to call them frenemies when I was in the cable business. I now like to call them collaborators. You have no choice. You have no choice but to work with these companies. There is no choice. You can't get around them. They are the last millimeter of glass between you and the consumer. So you have to embrace them, but you also have to keep them at arm's distance because they're competing directly with you. It's a weird relationship, but you're going to have to figure it out. As a collective, you can negotiate with big tech. I promise you that. YouTube wants to work with you. I'll get back to that in a second. This is the television universe in the United States. You can see YouTube is now the #1 channel in the United States. 10% of all TV usage in the United States is on YouTube. Video usage, it's even bigger because it's on mobile, but TV. And remember, Disney, that's a bunch of channels. NBCU, that's a bunch of channels. Netflix and YouTube, that's just one channel. And they're crushing the competition. When you dig in, though, and this is an interesting thing, this is new data that I just created a study for with ComScore. When you dig in, 85% of the impressions of advertising in the United States are still in pay TV and broadcast. By the way, that'll be truer here than it will be in the United States. So the economics still tilt towards television. Don't misread the data. And this is the company split. So this is the share of advertising exposure by company. And you can see Disney and NBCU, this is the United States, by the way, they still control a lot of it. But there's YouTube right there, right chasing the big players. The reason why Disney is so dominant is ABC and a bunch of other things, but Hulu is a massive advertising platform, and it's controlling a lot of dollars. This is the UK, so this is BARB, a Joint Industry Council a committee, and you can see that over 35, broadcast is crushing it still, although going down. And by the way, look at YouTube over this course. This is over 35. 10% of usage amongst old people is now on YouTube, on the TV. However, when you look under 35, oh shit. Yeah. And this is total video usage in the UK. So you can see TikTok, who's in the room, I think, they're now the #3 video usage in the UK for people under the age of 35. And these aren't just children. These are 16 to 34-year-olds. 34-year-olds are adults. So this is happening in Germany, too. So when you look at total usage, this is GWI, 3,800 people surveyed. You can see #1 is Netflix. #2, this is streaming on TV. Netflix, YouTube, Amazon Prime, then Disney, then ZDF and ARD. right? So this is streaming, not total television time. But when you conglomerate this, when you look at the companies as opposed to just the channels, what you see is Amazon and YouTube are massive. And they're going to continue to sop up a lot of the attention, time, mind space, and dollars in this market. However, especially with YouTube, there's an opportunity to play with them and distribute over them. They don't make their own content. They distribute your content. So think about that as a partner. In Europe, you can see how dominant YouTube is, and then when you look at the conglomeration, so YouTube Kids and YouTube Premium and YouTube Music all put together, YouTube is this dominant force. It's also a good broadcasting partner. You can make your own economics there in a way that you can't on other platforms. I'll get into that. If you want to know where this is headed, 60% of YouTube usage, 60% of YouTube usage in the United States is on television. This wave is coming here because you're super old, but millennials will grow up, Gen Zs will grow up, and they will dominate the usage there. The SVOD business, on the other hand, is not a really great business at the end of the day. Netflix fooled everybody. First of all, Netflix amortizes their content over an unreasonable amount of time, so they're not as profitable as we all like to think they are. Secondarily, the SVOD business sucks. In 2023, all of premium streaming gained 165 million new subscribers. Hooray! They lost 141 million subscribers. Who here has signed up for a premium streaming service, binged something, and then canceled it before the next billing cycle? Yeah, you're the problem. The problem is you. Hi, where's that Taylor Swift song? Anyway, the serial churning is now the new crisis, and none of them considered this when they left the wholesale business and went into the direct consumer business. Fast is this shiny new object. They use monthly average users as a metric. I don't know why. These are the biggest players in them, and you can see the revenue is going to grow fast, and these numbers are green and they're very shiny. In Germany, it's 258% growth over the next 4 or 5 years, right? But look at the total addressable market here. It's not that big a dollar amount, and it's not replacing the advertising you're losing on your traditional platforms. And you want to compare this. This is the real data to pay attention to. Fast, by 2028, will be $15 billion worldwide. It's a big number. It's a nice number. Most of that's going to be in the US. 90% of that will be in the US. This year, YouTube will do $34 or $35 billion by itself. So when you're thinking about the connected television, yeah, fast is nice, but don't forget YouTube. Because 60% of the world's advertising, not 60% of the world's digital advertising, 60% of the world's advertising is on 3 companies' platforms, Amazon, Meta, and Google, right? That's because first of all, no one gets fired for taking more advertising on YouTube. Second of all, their data is way better. They can not just deliver impressions and tell you where they're going, they can tell you how the outcomes worked. If you spent $1, you'll get $1.25 back. Even though a lot of it's fraud, it is still very effective. Return on ad spend, return on marketing investment, these are the metrics that advertisers are going to use moving forward. They're not buying impressions anymore, they're buying outcomes, and that's really crucial. So this is the set of choices that most consumers see when they turn on that home screen, the connected television in the home. And more often than not, they're going to swipe with their thumbs to control this screen. Who do you think they're going to go to first? I mean, I know what I go to first. I actually still go to traditional television because I love news. I'm a big news user. But for consumers under 35, where do you think they're going? ProSieben or YouTube? Who here has a child under the age of 15 in the home? How many of them watch YouTube on television? How many of them do it every day? Yeah. That's the choice they're going to make. But there's new money stampeding towards here. And if you embrace the data and, by the way, collaborate better as a group, you can negotiate with big tech death stars, and you can sop up new money that's coming to the TV. This is Trade Desk's prediction of retail media money, newfound advertising money coming to the television in the next couple of years. It's going to be a $6 billion business, and that's just in the United States. So think about that worldwide. The ability to watch and use your phone to shop. Who here has a phone in their hand when they watch television? Be honest. How many of you shop on somebody else's site while you're watching television? Raise your hand. Yeah. Now imagine if you could combine the two, and you're watching a cooking show, and you could order the ingredients being cooked on that show and have them delivered before the end of the show. That'd be super cool, wouldn't it? We have the technology to do that now. We don't do it because we don't collaborate well with each other around data. Data is the new oil. It really is. These platforms, the publishers, the advertising agencies, and the brands are investing tremendous amount of money in their data stack. If you're not thinking about how to play in this world, you're going to lose. This is the way the television ecosystem and the media ecosystem will be run. Another big wave is the creator economy. And creator economy is not just influencers, right? They are artists. They are people making stuff. The only reason I'm standing here today is because I play in the creator economy. The only reason any of you have ever seen that map, is because I play in the creator economy. So it isn't just about influencers doing makeup tutorials. It is an art canvas. And by the way, not only do consumers think this, but now advertisers believe that it's a better environment to put their dollars because it's more effective. And the biggest stars in the world, Mr. Beast, although he's in a little trouble right now, Mr. Beast, Jake Paul, Emma Chamberlain, these are all creators. They're not necessarily just influencers. Social media use in Europe, look at how many people, more than 50% of Europe's population is on social media every day, at least 1 hour, if not 6 or more. These are the top apps in social media. Meta, Meta, Meta. This is why Meta this year will sell as much advertising as all of television on the planet Earth. By itself. If you want to compete, you have to play their game. If you refuse to play their game, they're going to win. This is another big revenue source as well. The creator economy is going to be a $500 billion business before the end of this decade. You can play in it, but you have to agree that you want to play in it. This is where your consumers are, and this is where the dollars are going. You can ignore it, but that's ignorance. You have to put your user at the center of everything you're doing. You have to have a unified user strategy. First of all, you have to know who the fuck they are, what they want, and then you have to build everything around them. You can no longer just shove what you want to make out the door and hope that they take it. That's not how the world works anymore. This is the set of choices that consumers under the age of 40 now look at when they look at that home screen. Samsung, this is a PlayStation Plus, 50 million subscribers on the planet Earth. This is the must-have media sources that consumers tell us that they will never cancel. Spotify, #1, because it's the thing we touch every day, and then YouTube, 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 YouTube. That's what you're competing with, but you can also use that platform to win. Look at bundling, by the way, real quick. This is ESPN's individual service. This is their average churn. When they bundle them together, it halves, churn halves. When you look at Apple, they have the highest churn in premium streaming. When they bundle it with news and cloud and music and gaming, 75% reduction in churn. So bundling, working together, collaborating around data is the new way to navigate this universe. This is how the consumer sees the media universe that we operate in. This is the cacophony that they look at, and they want you to make it easier and more full of joy and full of less friction to operate in. The average consumer has 100 different unique logins, and that's why they're cutting back on media usage. From 22 to 23, they cut back on a half an hour of media usage per day, and they're not just putting down the glass and touching grass. Right? They're cutting out whole services, whole streaming services, whole social media services, whole gaming services. By the way, Western Europe, same thing. A half an hour less media usage per day. That's fewer ad impressions, that's fewer subscription revenues, that's less time spent with your content. We have to fix this crazy paradox of choice, this terrible user interface that we've created. It is our fault that it's so bad. We need to fix it. And we can do that by looking at the data, collaborating around data, and working together to provide a better service, a more elegant hierarchy of feeds for the consumer. Content is king, but data is now the bloodline. Yes, make your stuff, but pay attention to the odometer. Pay attention to the data and what it's telling you. When you want to compete in this universe, you have to put your user at the center of everything. And by the way, it's not just about thinking about how they consume your content. It's also making the rooms where you make your decisions look like the audience you want to have. If you're making decisions about your business right now without people under the age of 35 in the room, you're screwing your business. If you're making decisions about your business right now, and there aren't people in the room who grew up too poor to afford Netflix and Max and Apple TV Plus, you're gonna miss the mark. I promise you that. But if you put the user at the center of everything you do, if you make your decision-making tree look like the audience you want to have, if you take your audience and really embrace where they are headed, then you can do more than just survive in the user-centric era. You can thrive. Thank you.
I love it.
As fast as I could.
Wasn't that great? I mean, Evan, it's always a joy to hear from you because it wakes you up. It makes you look at things in a different way. Did everyone get some new information? Do you feel a little bit more enlivened about what's going on in the wider picture of media? Because that's the whole point of this keynote.
Well, and I lost at least 5 pounds doing it. So.
Exactly, I know. So we're going to do about 5 minutes, and then we're going to come to you for about 5 minutes. So if you have a question, think about what that is, because I'm going to come to you and ask for your questions in very, very shortly. So Evan, I mean, there's lots of things I could ask you about. One of the things that I thought was interesting, you said at one point, 83% of the world's population is gamers. How can
85%.
85%. How can the TV business or the media business capitalize on that? Do you have any views on that? Because we've often thought of the gaming and TV as being very different.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about gaming, the majority of the world's gamers are not, kids in the basement playing Fortnite, right? The majority of the world's gamers are on their phone on the bus, right? And phone game users are majority women, and they're mostly over 25. So it's a different consumer base. Think about the best case study I can give you for the transformation for this user-centric era is the New York Times. It's a United States publication, but it's a worldwide global publication as well. And in 2010, they were a paper product delivered by diesel truck. And they were going south, family-run business, and everyone was counting them out. Now, they're one of the best gaming companies in the world. They're one of the best podcast companies in the world. And the reason that worked for them is, what do our consumers like to do? Who are our consumers? They didn't say, we have to go after the kids and make games for them, first-person shooter games. They said, our consumers love the crossword puzzle. So they made puzzle games. Wordle, they bought for next to nothing, by the way. But all their games are really oriented towards the people who read their newspaper. That is the lesson. So if you make factual entertainment, you can make a game relatively quickly using AI that is a quiz game. Costs very little to make it. You can push it out the door very, very quickly. There's a great company called Little Snack who you can work with if you're looking for an example. So think about your consumers and make games that meet your content and meet your audience. And by the way, move over aside, market in games. Like, you don't only have to make games. Think about the captive audience that is there. Mobile gaming advertising is a great way to promote your content. Think about the audience. Think about yourself. Think about your own user habits. You sit on the bus, or you're wasting time, you're playing these games, right? And then, by the way, you're playing them against your friends. If an ad pops up for a new show in there, it's the only thing you're looking at.
Right.
And so it's a great marketing environment as well.
You talked a lot about YouTube. I think a lot of us know that YouTube's a big force, but it's almost scary when you see how big a force it is when you look at some of your data. You talked about collaborating with YouTube, that there's a way to work with them. I think a lot of people in the media business, and certainly the traditional linear television business, sort of think, well, YouTube? I mean, what is that? So when you say collaborate with them, what are you talking about? The collaborators.
So,
idea.
I mean, if you're a television channel in Germany right now, you distribute it on ProSieben, right? It's the same thing. It's another broadcasting platform. And if you're a public broadcaster right now and you are not putting your news live on YouTube, you are not meeting your mission.
Yep.
You are ceding that platform to the bad actors and the misinformation artists. The other side of that is, it is not a duplicative audience. It is not it does not cannibalize in any way. It is two different audiences. I pushed Channel 4 to make this change, to put up more of their content, not just news, but their long-form entertainment content on YouTube. They experimented with it. They put whole shows and series up on YouTube. It's two different audiences. It's found revenue. Yeah, you have to give a big piece of the vig to YouTube, but it's new money. And I got into a little bit of a debate with the head of news at BBC in a conference at once, and she asked me, you know, we don't get as much attribution. We get 50% of the attribution on YouTube that we get when it's in our app. How do you square that? And I said, well, let me do the math. I'm not a mathematician. I dropped out of college, but I think that 50% attribution is better than zero.
Than zero, exactly.
And so there is a new audience there. There are new revenues there.
Right.
And by the way, YouTube wants to work with the content creators of this continent. They have, by the way, they have no choice. They can't survive on cats playing piano. That's not their business model.
Or even on Mr. Beast.
Yeah, right. They are Jimmy Fallon's, most of his audience is on YouTube. SNL, most of their audience is on YouTube. It's the only place I watch SNL.
Exactly.
And so think about that in your own market.
Questions for Evan. What did you think? What comes up? Anyone? Oh, come on! I gave you a lead up.
It's a lot
Think
very
about
fast.
It. Yes, there's one. Go ahead.
So I have a question.
Go ahead.
So on the first slide, when you had the map, you had the valuations of the companies. Did you also look into breaking those larger companies up? So for example, Apple, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to look at the overall valuation if you only want to look at media. Did you also investigate how much of Apple's media business is compared to those other organizations?
It's impossible to do. They don't break it out, and so it's hard to do that. But the reason why I don't do that is because they take their profits from the iPhone and lose money in TV in order to steal the audience from you.
That's right.
We have no idea whether YouTube is profitable. We will, until they get broken up, which I actually think they may be, we will never know whether they're profitable. Amazon Prime will never be profitable. It will never be. It's not made to be profitable. It's made to keep you in the ecosystem, to gather your data, to sell you shit. That's why they do it. So I don't break it out to make a point, which is they're taking their money, their profits from other areas, and they're invading your territory in order to put you, not put you out of business, but to dominate you. That's the idea behind big tech. Tim Cook likes to come off as a nice guy. I won't finish that sentence.
They have different business models.
They have different business models.
Very different business models. And they're using content as a loss leader. It's almost like a supermarket in the old days. You have the DVDs at the front. That was a loss leader just to get people in.
Right.
It's a little bit like that.
It's a honey trap. Yeah, that's
It's
exactly
a honey
right.
trap.
But there is also an opportunity. The ability to sell your content again to large language models in AI, that's going to be a brand new revenue stream over the next 10 years. That's going to be found. That's like the DVD business. Remember when we invented that? And then streaming. Everybody rushed towards that. The sale of our content, our scripts, our transcripts to train large language models, that's going to be a very lucrative business.
Yeah, in fact, we've been talking about that in another part of the universe, sort of what is your IP worth in an AI world? What can you actually do?
A lot, because there is a data paucity. There is a data race going on right now, and there isn't enough data. There are these things called hallucinations that, you know, is a perfect room to say this. Black Nazis, you know, that when you search Nazis, the Google AI was producing black Nazis as the only pictures you could. So they took down the model.
Which don't exist.
Well, they do.
Well, they
He's
do,
running
but
for governor of North Carolina.
exactly,
right now.
he is.
That's a U.S. joke, but Google
Yeah.
it, you'll find it. So there are these things called hallucinations, and that's because there's not enough data to train the large language and these, you know, the mid-journeys and the rest of these.
So that's one opportunity for this group. What's another one? What do you see as the big opportunity?
So the big thing is the creator economy. I could do that much time just on the creator economy. Again, my entire business is writing and making these infographics and building a direct relationship with my audience. It's not about audience anymore, it's about community. It's about the exchange is no longer in dollars, it's in passion. And the higher level of the passion, the better your business will be. You do not need to be Mr. Beast or a massive 100 million subscriber platform on YouTube or Instagram in order to have a good business. I don't have 1 million followers. I don't have close to 1 million followers, but I'm making more money now than I did when I worked for corporate media.
Yeah.
And that's because I have a community, I hyper-serve them, and they pay
And they pay for it.
for the content.
Yep.
You paid me to come here. And that's because I have a community of people. I mean, the fact that I stood in a room in Potsdam, Germany, and I was able to ask how many of you have seen this map, and a good percentage raised their hands, that is proof of the pudding. That is the new model. It's not the only model. It's not exclusive of selling content to Netflix and ZDF and ARD, but it's a yes and, which is an improv term. You can do both. You should do both. Rather than invest 100,000 euro in a sizzle and then take 6 months of your life to pitch the show, only to sell it and maybe get a pilot made, but then actually not make the show. It's just a grind. It's why I don't do it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you used to do it.
Yeah,
and it made sense to do it before.
Yeah, back then.
Doesn't
but
make
now,
sense now.
it doesn't. And what does make sense is take that same $100,000 invested in character studies that you can put up on TikTok or on YouTube, get data back instantly.
See what happens.
Double click on what works, eject what doesn't, build a community, get them to subscribe, and there are bespoke paid subscription models that you can use to generate income in addition to the big shows that you sell to the big publishers.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you have a passionate audience for a piece of content, it will be much easier to sell to the big platforms. Mr. Beast got the most money ever for a game show, $100 million. A third of that is just advertising on his channel.
Yeah, wow.
So there's a great model out there, but you have to look at it and you have to explore it. And you have to hire people in your office who are young enough to understand how the model works.
Right. Another question for Evan before we close this out? Yes, here's one. It's on. Go ahead.
Yeah, it is on. One question, or maybe two, they're a bit linked.
I'll charge
how
you for
do you
this
feel about content windowing? Would you just say put it all out at the same time wherever it can be shown? And maybe a bit linked to that, would you recommend a broadcaster to even launch a streaming service, or would you say just put it on platforms that exist like YouTube?
I mean, I think I don't use the ZDF and ARD services because I can't access them. I don't know how well they're working. I do think it's important that you have your own app, but I don't think you need to be precious about it. Do you know what I mean? There are audiences that will never go to your app because they just don't have the muscle or the habit of doing so. No, I don't think you should just be indiscriminately putting your content everywhere. I think you have to sit down. If I'm making an argument for anything, it's understand who the audience is that you want to serve, where they inhabit, look at the data and window appropriately based on the data itself. Be strategic. Don't be unstrategic and indiscriminate. It's not a shotgun. It's a scalpel. But that said, especially for the public broadcasters or a broadcaster, I don't understand why you're not putting stuff live on YouTube the day it's on the television platform. Because, and if this presentation didn't make this case, I'll say it in very slow words right now, it's the same thing. YouTube is TV. It's the #1 television channel on the planet Earth. And so if you're not embracing that it's like only dealing with one cable service. They are the new cable. You're not going to get a fee out of them, but you're going to get revenue. And you're also going to get better data back from YouTube than you've ever gotten from a cable company or any other provider.
And you're also going to get to an audience you may not have gotten to.
Yeah, and today you're definitely going to get to an audience, like the audience under 35, but especially the audience under 25, they're not watching traditional television. They may watch it here and there, but after they're done with YouTube and Netflix and TikTok, like it's regular TV is 4th, 5th, 6th place in the minds of most consumers, if they watch it ever at all. The #1 children's channel on the planet Earth is Ryan's World, which was started by a 4-year-old. I'm not shitting you. And that platform is now massive. By the way, they're the only children's programmers on the planet Earth that have figured out how to make money. And it's not advertising, because nobody wants to advertise in kids programming anymore. It's merchandise.
Merchandise.
$250 million a year in merch. The kid's now 12. He self-released his own movie this year. Feature film. By the way, Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, self-financed, self-released, creator economy. I can go down the list. So there is this great platform out there, and you don't have to be massive. You can be a little provider like me and still make a good living.
That's a really good note to end on. It's the big ships aren't going away, but the big ships have to think differently, and they have to embrace the new world in a different way. Yeah?
Yeah, and I think if you look at those big tech Death Stars, you can hitch a ride on them.
Hitch a ride, that's good.
You can really generate revenue by using their power to your benefit, but you have to understand how they work.
Right.
I'll be here for breakfast tomorrow if you want to ask any questions.
Yeah. I hope that you will come and ask him some more questions. I really appreciate your attention on this. Could you please join me in thanking Evan Shapiro? Yeah.